Treaty 4 territory. These are the homelands of the Nihiawak, the Anishinaabe, the Lakota, and Dakota peoples, and the Métis and Michif nations. Treaty 4 continues to be the shared territory of diverse peoples from far and near. It's wonderful to see so many of you here tonight. It's a packed house. I'm very excited. I've never seen this room quite so full. Thank you for joining us for the 40th James M. Minifie lecture. Tonight we celebrate a welcome return. For 4 decades now, the Minifie lecture has been a cornerstone of our community's democratic conversation. After a 5-year post-COVID hiatus, its revival reflects the U of R's enduring commitment to journalism's vital role in our democracy and to our School of Journalism, the first in Western Canada. Since 1981, the school's lecture series has honored James M. Minifie, a Saskatchewan homesteader, Rhodes Scholar, and one of Canada's most courageous journalists. Minifie spent 15 years as CBC's Washington correspondent, bringing the world into Canadian living rooms. Since 1981, the James M. Minifie Fund has also helped bring Canada's finest journalists to Regina. Over the decades, we've reflected here together on the issues that have most mattered to the health of Canadian democracy and its watchdog. The lecture series is a fitting tribute to Minifie's legacy. In fact, I'm very pleased to welcome several Minifie family members this evening. These include Harry and his family, and Julian Murray Minifie, 87 years young. She made the trip from Victoria to be with us tonight. Pleasure to chat with her earlier. On behalf of the Faculty of Arts and the School of Journalism, I also want to acknowledge those who have worked so hard behind the scenes to bring the Minifie back this year. This cast includes Emily Lintz, Ayo Adumeda Alim, Suitang Pachal, Michelle Nicholson, Wanda Schmokel, Brendan Fairbrother, Zeel Patel, Colette Schlamp, and many, many others that I can't name right now. Thank you to everyone who has done the heavy lifting to make this evening possible. Let me also thank the many friends of the School of Journalism, its alumni who cast everyday light on important public issues, its industry partners who take in the school's interns, its teaching staff who are the heart of the enterprise, and the school's donors who help to make good things, just like this lecture, happen. In these post-truth times, our democracy urgently needs a reliable and abundant supply of high-quality news. So I thank all of you for being there for journalism and for our journalism school. To bring greetings on behalf of the university, I'm now pleased to welcome Dr. Jeff Keshen, our President and Vice Chancellor. As an historian, he has a special appreciation for the role of the press corps in building a well-informed and robust democracy. Unsurprisingly then, President Keshen has been instrumental in championing this lecture's return. Please join me in welcoming President Keshen.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Toby, and for everything that you do for your faculty and the university and your role as Dean of Arts. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I want to begin like Toby. It's always important to acknowledge that we are so honored to gather on Treaty 4 territory, and the University of Regina, with its faculties of nursing and social work, and with the work that our Faculty of Education does in northern Saskatchewan communities, also has a presence in Treaty 6. And these are the traditional homelands of the Nihiawak, the Anishinaabe, the Dakota peoples, and the homeland of the Métis and Michif Nation. And today these lands continue to be the shared territory of diverse peoples who come to this beautiful province, where many people stray to come here from near and from far. Wow, it is wonderful to see so many people here. A reflection of how important the Minifie lecture is. It has been for decades on our campus and in the wider community. Everyone has highly anticipated the return of this historic lecture series that means so much to the university, means so much to our wider community, and as you heard, goes all the way back to 1981. I want to thank the School of Journalism and everyone who's worked so hard to bring the Minifie lecture back after a 5-year hiatus. I very much appreciate all of your commitment to our academic programs, to meaningful engagement with our wider community, and to the noble and to the vital profession of journalism. Historically, as you can see, the Minifie Lecture has been one of the best attended and highest profile events on our campus. It's not surprising, at least for a couple of reasons. For one thing, the lecture is in honor of James M. Minifie. As Toby said, he grew up in this province. After his family came here from England, he became a titan of Canadian journalism. And as an historian, we read his books as well, such as Peacemaker and Powder Monkey. Many of you will be familiar with that. His name lends additional gravitas to this lecture, because it is synonymous with top-flight journalism. In addition, the list of past lectures, ranging from Knowlton Nash to Chantal Hébert to Wab Kinew to Peter Mansbridge, is a veritable who's who of past and present Canadian journalism and public discourse. Visit our School of Journalism, see their photos on display, and for the wonderful visual and historical visual record of this lecture, and of our university's continuing commitment to high quality and thought-provoking academic and journalistic discourse. It will be wonderful, absolutely wonderful to see Andrew Coyne added to this photographic record after tonight's lecture. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome Andrew to this esteemed group and to our university. It is my honor to introduce Andrew. In doing so, however, it's important to take just a little bit back in time, because as some of you may not, probably a lot of you know, Andrew comes from a very distinguished family that has made its mark in Canadian life in several ways. Andrew's grandfather, James Henry Coyne, was a prominent lawyer, and he was an historian, fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, and that organization's president from 1926 to 27. Andrew's father, James Elliott Coyne, a Rhodes Scholar and economist who served as governor of the Bank of Canada from 1955 to 1961. He was, as those of us who study Canadian history know, he was a prominent figure in what was called the Coyne Affair, or the Coyne Crisis, in which he disagreed with the Diefenbaker government's economic policies, which he believed were weakening Canada's economic position, particularly then with the United States. And Andrew's sister, Susan Coyne, a noted writer and actor who was a member of the Order of Canada, which now brings me to Andrew himself, a member of this distinguished family who in his own right has made absolutely tremendous contributions to journalism and public discourse in Canada. He is a highly distinguished Canadian political and economic journalist with a career that spans 40 years. He is currently a columnist for the Globe and Mail, was previously comment editor of the National Post, and national editor of Maclean's magazine. He has contributed to publications in Canada and abroad, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the National Review, the Walrus. He is, as many of you know here, probably all of you know, a weekly panelist on CBC's The National and his podcast, At Issue. He's raised in Winnipeg. He holds degrees from the University of Toronto and the London School of Economics. His book, The Crisis of Canadian Democracy, just published, is a national political bestseller. His awards are many. Among them, the National Newspaper Award for Editorial Writing, the Hyman Sullivan Award for Excellence in Public Policy Journalism. You know, at a time when quality, nonpartisan journalism is needed more than ever, all of us are looking forward to Andrew's perspectives on Canada and the world, and how news and politics are being portrayed to all of us in a rapidly changing journalistic environment. Please join me in welcoming the star this evening, Andrew Coyne.
After an introduction like that, I can't do nothing but probably disappoint you. That's a tough act to follow, not only all the distinguished speakers who share this roster, but also apparently my own family members. But I do want to say, I cannot tell you what a great honor it is to be asked to give the Minifie Lecture, particularly the presence of members of the Minifie family. James Minifie was a remarkable man working in a remarkable time. A swashbuckling foreign correspondent who fought in the First World War as a teenager, was injured by a bomb covered in the Second, who stops in between covering the Spanish Civil War and the rise of Mussolini. We have few such giants in our business today. Indeed, the industry itself has shrunk. Not too long ago, there was a cottage industry in this country built around the idea that the media had grown too powerful. As late as 1981, a whole Royal Commission, the Kent Commission, was devoted to the concept. Now the concern is increasingly that the media are not powerful enough. Once we worried that the mass media had acquired too much influence, shaping our debates, our perceptions, our very ways of thinking. Now there is no less concern that the media no longer shape much of anything, and that in their weakness, something vastly worse is taking their place. Indeed, it has become a commonplace that the media, and by the media I mean mostly the news media, and by news media I mean mostly the newspapers, and by newspapers I mean mostly the existing legacy publishers. I'll start again. It has become a commonplace that the media is in danger of disappearing altogether. Certainly it's commonplace in the media. In the whole history of the world, I venture to say, there has never been a decline and fall so well advertised, so comprehensively documented and decisively bemoaned in advance of it actually happening. With the quickening of industrial change in recent years, those of us in the nattering trade have grown used to lecturing others on the impermanence of life, the absence of guarantees, and the disappearance of the 40-year job. Now we are discovering all these lessons for ourselves, and we don't like it one bit. I say this not to minimize in any way the scale of the disaster or the human toll. When asked how I am these days, I say I'm healthy and I'm employed. And as I do, I am mindful that this is not true for many of my colleagues who are now looking for work or employed in unstable, low-wage positions or losing their benefits. It is without question an unhappy time for the industry and for those who work in it, even if we tend to dwell on it rather more than is strictly defensible as a matter of news. Because, as we will be the first to tell you, what is threatened is not just the health and happiness of our industry, but of society at large, indeed of democracy. That's natural, I suppose. As humans, we have a remarkable ability to merge our own interests with the general interest, not cynically or self-servingly, but quite sincerely. And yet we are most prone to doing so when we're after something. Hence the industry's long, passionate, and ultimately successful campaign for government help. At first, this was behind closed doors in the corporate suite, then in PR blasts and committee reports from publishers and other interested parties, eventually on our own news and comment pages. The storyline is always the same. The industry is in crisis and it's up to the government to fix it. Eventually, the Liberal government came through with a raft of measures aimed at propping up the industry, including direct subsidies for reporting under the Local Journalism Initiative, the digital subscription tax credit, and the labor tax credit for qualifying news organizations. They were supposed to be temporary. They have proved not to be. Well, before discussing the merits or demerits of these, let's just pause a while to talk about how we got here. Why are we in our present state? The answer is well known, or certainly we've done our best to make it so. Apparently, there was this thing called the internet that appeared on the horizon all of a sudden and changed everything. The internet brought the marginal cost of distribution to near zero, allowing literally thousands of competitors to emerge. Those of us who now glory in the title of content providers have woken up discovered that there are lots and lots of people who will do what we do for free. And what is more, can do it well or better than we do, often based on specialized knowledge that we may not possess. At the same time, the internet has merged what were previously separate industries, print, radio, television, online, making close competitors of news outlets that might previously not have regarded each other as such. The CBC, to take one example, is now in the publishing business in a rather more determined way and with rather more in the way of resources than the newspaper business's bungling efforts to pivot to video. Also erased have been the national boundaries that once defined a publication's reach, opening the way for global brands to emerge, the New York Times, the Guardian, the BBC, and so on, offering not only to bring the world to Canadians, but increasingly to bring Canada to Canadians. The day is not far off, I predict, when the New York Times will start publishing a fully Canadian edition. With the multiplicity of news sources, audience is fragmented. Worse, the advertisers on which newspapers and other media have historically relied for the bulk of their revenues have deserted them. First for eBay and Craigslist, then fatally for Facebook and Google. It's an unnerving, disorienting time to be in the business. With the loss of revenues, we've been forced to shed staff, and as staff have been shed, the quality has suffered, and revenues have declined further. Much of this will be familiar to you. It's not that it's not true, it's just that it's not the whole truth. People in our industry talk about our present dilemma as if it were something that just happened to us, like the weather. Oh, well, you know, it's the internet, isn't it? It's social media, it's Google. It's just completely disrupted the business model. I'm inclined to think people in other industries listen to this and say, oh, really? So you say the internet killed your business model? Join the club. Everybody's business has been disrupted by the internet. Many other industries have been gutted. Hundreds and thousands of jobs in other sectors have been lost. We can talk all we want about the role of social media, and I will, or Google or whatnot, but in the end it comes down to whether we're offering a compelling enough product to attract and keep paying customers. And if we're honest with ourselves, we will concede that too often we have not. We ignored the web for far too long, and then when we got wise, we put out lousy web pages. Most of them seem to have been designed with no other purpose but to deter anyone from reading them. Cluttered with ads and auto-played videos and links to other sites. And when the iPhone and the iPad came along, we put out lousy iPod and iPhone and iPad apps. We stood and watched as Craigslist and eBay took our classified ads business, once one of our major revenue sources. When it became clear that Facebook and Google were taking the rest of our advertising, we complained that this was dirty pool. You remember? They're stealing our content. That's what we said. How were they stealing our content? By posting links to our content. Links that we encouraged our readers to post because they sent readers to our pages by the millions every day. For this crime, we demanded that the social media networks be made to pay a tax. And when Facebook in particular responded when the government did this by doing what the government had effectively told it to do, that is to say, when it stopped posting links to news sites, we complained even more bitterly. Which sort of tells you what this was really about. Their stealing our content line was all just a rationalization. What it was really about was Facebook and Google have lots of money, make them give some of it to us. But they earned that money, fair and square. The reason they're now selling the ads that we used to sell is very simple. It's because they offer a better service to advertisers. They built the proverbial better mousetrap. It took us a long time to realize this. So for years, in the early days of the net, we gave away all of our content for free. All the gurus told us that this is what we should do. We bet the farm on attracting a mass audience in hopes of holding on to advertisers at the very moment they were leaving. So we thought we were going to get rich doing it. We're still doing it, some of us, even today, with clickbait, nonsense stories online that makes us look like asses we're posting, at the price of damaging our reputation with more discerning readers. Mind you, there's nothing particularly new in this. We've never charged the reader, at least in North America, Europe's a little different, we've never charged the reader more than a fraction of the costs of producing a newspaper, 20 to 25%, relying instead on sales of advertising to cover the remainder. That's our historic business model. As a result, we generally substituted quantity for quality, if you really want to know the truth, filling the paper with much more copy than could ever be read for the quite literal purpose of filling the spaces between the ads. But when the newspaper was one of the very few games in town, when the choices available were one or two newspapers, a couple of television stations, radio, etc., when advertisers didn't much care what was in between the ads, so long as the ads themselves attracted eyeballs, we didn't have to be that good, frankly. The difference is we could get away with it then. We can't now. So for all the challenges posed by the internet, the rise of social media, and Google and Facebook, we really cannot be allowed to overlook our own contributions to our demise. A lot of our ills are self-inflicted. But never mind. What's the result? This is the second line of argument. This is not only an industry crisis, we are keen to tell everyone, it's a crisis of trust, No, it's a crisis of democracy. Well, actually, there's a bit of truth in this. It just depends on what you mean. If the argument is that there's a decline in trust in the media, well, that's true, but it's overstated. Mistrust of the mainstream media is hardly a new phenomenon. The media have always been mistrusted, at least some of the time, and for the most part have always been deserving of some measure of mistrust. We get things wrong, we hunt in packs, we have our biases. The crisis in trust in the media, I should say, has to be seen in a broader context, a crisis of trust in all authority, a hostility among a certain section of the population to anyone who knows anything about anything. And not only experts, but expertise, which is to say knowledge, which is to say facts. It is, as some have called it, an epistemic crisis, a situation in which a significant section of the population is simply unreachable by any amount of evidence or facts. In fact, is contemptuous of the whole idea. One way to see this is in the evolution of the term fake news. It originally referred to the avalanche of false information to be found online, especially since the advent of social media, which has encouraged and fed this epistemic crisis. It quickly morphed into a derisive term for actual news, real facts, not fake ones. Fake news in its original sense is a fact of life in the age of social media, when anyone can be a publisher without the obligation to maintain an ongoing business based on earning reader trust, careful editing, etc. It would be proliferating regardless of the state of the legitimate news business. Of far greater concern, at least to me, is the climate of opinion that is so receptive to fake news. It's the demand for fake news, not the supply, that is the real problem. It isn't just that so many people are so willing to believe fake news, but that they're so eager to disbelieve the real news. It is the demonstrable preference among much of the public for news that fits their preconceptions, not only in terms of the source that they seek out, the so-called filter bubbles, but the items they read and the facts they believe that is the cause of such justified alarm. But here again, we should be careful. Some part of the appeal of fake news is understandable and non-threatening. Fantasy has always had its attractions, as readers of supermarket tabloids have long known. Who would not prefer to live in a world in which literally anything is possible, set aside the dull limitations of reality? Neither is mistrust of the mainstream media an entirely new phenomenon, as I said earlier. So to some extent, people have always preferred to have their own biases confirmed. Liberals have always tended to read liberal newspapers, and conservatives read conservative newspapers. I wish it were otherwise, but that is what human beings are like. What's different about the present is that this freewheeling popular mistrust has been amplified and weaponized. It isn't just the sheer volume of fakery that is now on offer, unbounded by any restraint, legal, ethical, technical, or economic. It is that the internet has allowed individuals who are alienated from society, who had previously been alone in their parents' basement wondering if they're crazy, to connect with one another and solidify their convictions, tell each other you're not crazy, everyone else is crazy, and to generalize them into a broader theory, not only about the media as the visible expression of the culture, but about Muslims or Jews or whatever else they fear or blame. And so a healthy skepticism about this reporter or that outlet has curdled into blind rejectionism, a childish belief that the media, all of it, is engaged in a one-sided conspiracy to deceive the public, of which any story the reader does not like is taken as evidence. This has much broader roots, I suggest to you, than just the problems of the media. While there is some evidence of this in most democratic societies, it's not coincidental that it has found its worst expression in the United States, a society that over the last 2 decades has undergone a series of extraordinary traumas. 9/11, the Iraq War, the housing market collapse, and financial crisis, that have rightly or wrongly tended to discredit experts and expertise among a large section of the public. This generalized mistrust of experts has fused with existing social divisions over cultural change and identity politics to create a kind of class war. Class defined not by money or birth, but by education and culture and geography. There is, among a certain section of the public, less educated, rural, more conservative in their social views, a boiling resentment of the urban cosmopolitan elites and their emissaries in the liberal media, who've
been looking down their noses at them all these years, and worse, shoving their cultural agenda down their throats and suppressing their right to protest about it. There is some truth in this too. That condescension is often real. The media does tilt left, and political correctness is a thing. So there's plenty of fault on both sides. But the answer to the excesses of identity politics on the left is not identity politics for white guys. The alternative to PC stifling of free speech is not just saying whatever nasty or intemperate thing enters your head. And the response to urban elite snobbery cannot be populist know-nothingness. For who and what constitutes the people populists are so eager to protect can quickly become a matter of sorting out friends and enemies, us and them. That's toxic enough when the thems are of the traditional kind, big business, big labor, the rich, and so on. It's especially toxic when it merges with nationalism, where you start targeting immigrants and foreigners of all kinds. But it's suicidal when the them becomes, in effect, anyone who knows anything about anything. This way lies madness, and possibly, as we've seen south of the border, the end of democracy. It's too simple to blame all this on the decline of traditional media, but neither is it disconnected from it. Better to say that both are the product of the same disruption of traditional modes of debate and consensus forming brought about by social media. Once, in order to publish and propagate a point of view, a writer would have to have access not just to a printing press, but to a means of distributing what was printed. That meant persuading editors and publishers and bookstores and newsstands and so on, people with skin in the game, with businesses to run and reputations to defend of its merits. Not that it was necessarily true or right, but that it was an opinion that could fairly be held. As such, that entrusted to the media and similar institutions a kind of gatekeeper function. In effect, they guarded the boundaries of the public square and of legitimate debate. They decided the subject in which, in that lovely old phrase, reasonable people could differ. Each part of that phrase bears equal emphasis. On the one hand, at their best, they were upholding the idea that it was okay to differ, that there's not just one side to every story, that you have a right to your opinion even if the whole world is against you. On the other hand, you had to be reasonable about it. You could always stand on a street corner and yell whatever you like, but if you wanted access to a mass audience, what we today call a platform, you had to go to the gatekeepers. You had to show you were on planet Earth. Now the gatekeepers, let me assure you, didn't always get this right. Sometimes, maybe often, legitimate opinions and voices from outside the mainstream were unjustly excluded. But, well, they kept the crazies out. They consigned marginal ideas